The scent hit him like lightning, wild honey and mountain sage, threading through the pine-thick air of the Cascade Range. Ranger Kael Thornwick froze mid-stride, nostrils flaring, as his wolf stirred restlessly beneath his skin. Someone was hiding in his territory. Someone who smelled like home and danger all at once. What he found in that abandoned cabin would shatter everything he thought he knew about fate, mates, and the woman who'd been running from shadows her entire life. The old mining cabin sat like a forgotten wound against the mountainside, its weathered logs gray with age and abandonment. Seraphina Blackthorn pressed her back against the splintered door, chest heaving as she surveyed her new prison. 3 days of hiking through wilderness that could kill the unprepared. And this was her sanctuary. 4 walls, a leaking roof, and silence so complete it made her ears ring. She'd left everything behind in Denver. Her apartment, with its triple-locked door, her job at the antiquarian bookshop, even her real name buried beneath layers of false documents. The package that had arrived 2 weeks ago changed everything. A single photograph of her parents' car accident from 23 years ago. Except in this version, she could see the claw marks on the metal, Pyre said. The note attached had been simple. "We know what you are. We're coming." Seraphina had run before whoever sent it could find her. Again, the cabin's interior smelled of dust, old wood, and something else, something wild that made her skin prickle. She pushed the sensation aside and focused on survival. Water from the well outside still ran clear, though it tasted of minerals and earth. Canned goods lined a shelf, left behind by the last occupant. She could last weeks here if needed, hidden in the vast wilderness of the North Cascades. As dusk painted the peaks purple, Seraphina allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe she'd finally found a place where the strange incidents that followed her couldn't reach. The electrical storms that came from nowhere when she was angry, the way animals seemed to understand her, the dreams of running on 4 legs through moonlit forests, all of it would fade here in the silence. She was wrong. The first sign came at midnight. A howl, long and haunting, echoed through the valley. Then another, closer. Seraphina pressed herself against the cabin's back wall, away from the windows. Wolves were common in these mountains, she told herself. Nothing unusual about their presence. But these weren't ordinary wolves. 20 miles away, Kael Thornwick sat bolt upright in his ranger station cabin, every instinct screaming alert. As alpha of the Cascade Mountain Pack, he knew every scent, every creature, every breath of wind that moved through his territory. This was something new, something that called to parts of himself he'd kept buried for 34 years. Boss? His second-in-command, Jasper Grimwald, appeared in the doorway. The younger man's eyes held the golden gleam that meant his wolf was close to the surface. "You feel that?" Kael nodded grimly. "New presence in Sector 7. Human, but..." He trailed off, unsure how to explain the electric current running beneath his skin. But what? Different. Kael reached for his ranger jacket, official cover for his real purpose in these mountains. "I'm going to investigate. Keep the others on patrol." Standard formations. The scent trail led him through old-growth forest, where Douglas firs towered like ancient guardians. With each step, his wolf grew more restless, more insistent. "Mine," it whispered. "Protect. Claim." Kael forced the primitive urges down. He'd learned control the hard way. through tragedy that still haunted his dreams. The abandoned mining cabin came into view just as dawn touched the peaks. Kael approached carefully, ranger training warring with wolf instinct. Smoke drifted from the chimney. Someone had made themselves at home in his territory without permission. Standard protocol demanded he identify the trespasser and escort them to safety. But nothing about this felt standard. Through the grimy window, he caught a glimpse of movement. A woman with midnight black hair paced the small interior, graceful even in obvious distress. When she turned toward the window, Kael's breath caught. Heart-shaped face, storm-gray eyes, skin pale as moonlight. She was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that spoke to something primal in his blood. Their gazes met through the glass. The world tilted. Power crackled between them, invisible but undeniable. His wolf howled recognition, while something deep inside her stirred an answer. The scent of ozone filled the air as electricity literally sparked around her, making the hair on his arms stand up. She stumbled backward, fear replacing curiosity in her eyes. In that moment, Kael understood two things that would change his life forever. This woman was his mate, destined and perfect, and completely unaware of what she was. And she was absolutely terrified of him. Seraphina's first instinct was to run. The man outside her window radiated authority and danger in equal measure, his broad shoulders filling the frame as he studied her with predatory focus. But something in his amber eyes stopped her, not threat, but recognition so profound it stole her breath. "Ma'am, I'm Ranger Thornwick." He called through the glass, his voice carrying the rough cadence of mountains and wilderness. "I need you to step outside, please." Every survival instinct screamed against it. She'd spent 23 years learning to trust no one, especially not men in uniform who asked too many questions. But when she looked at him again, the electricity crackling around her fingertips calmed for the first time in weeks. "I'm not trespassing," she called back, proud that her voice remained steady. "This cabin's been abandoned for years, processes. That's not the issue." Kael stepped closer to the window, and she caught sight of his face clearly. Strong jaw shadowed with stubble, cheekbones that could cut glass, eyes that seemed to look straight through her careful walls. "This is protected wilderness. People get lost, hurt. I'm here to help." Help. The word was foreign in her vocabulary. When had anyone ever helped Seraphina Blackthorn without wanting something in return? She opened the door slowly, keeping her hands visible but ready to bolt. The moment she stepped outside, something shifted in the air between them. The ranger's pupils dilated, his nostrils flaring slightly as if scenting the wind. For a heartbeat, she could have sworn his eyes flashed gold. "What's your name?" he asked, voice rougher now. "Sarah Blake." She lied automatically. "I'm just taking some time away from the city to think." Kael's jaw tightened. He could smell the deception rolling off her. But underneath lay terror so profound it made his wolf whine in distress. This woman was running from something that had left her bone-deep afraid. "Come so. These mountains can be dangerous for someone unfamiliar with them," he said carefully. "Weather changes fast. Wildlife's active. I have a responsibility to ensure civilian safety." Seraphina studied his uniform, the official patches, and radio clipped to his belt. Everything about him screamed legitimate law enforcement, but her instincts rarely lied about threats. This man was dangerous, but not to her. At least, not in the way she'd grown to expect. I can take care of myself, she said. Can you? His gaze flicked to her hands, where she'd unconsciously clenched her fists. Tiny sparks danced between her knuckles. Because that's not exactly normal. Ice flooded her veins. He'd seen, after a lifetime of hiding, of carefully controlling her abilities, she'd slipped in front of a federal officer. Seraphina took a step back, already calculating escape routes. Don't. Kael's voice gentled. I'm not going to hurt you. You don't understand. I understand more than you think. He glanced around the clearing, then made a decision that went against every protocol he'd ever learned. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this mountain. My career, my life, depends on your discretion. Seraphina froze. What could a park ranger possibly need to hide? Kael closed his eyes, centering himself the way his father had taught him before the old alpha died. Then he let just enough of his wolf surface, a flash of gold in his irises, canine teeth extending slightly, the scent of pine and wild places rolling off him in waves. You're not the only one with secrets, he said quietly. She stared at him, mind reeling. You're not entirely human, no. He let his features return to normal, though the wolf remained restless beneath his skin. And neither are you. The question is, do you know what you are? Seraphina's world tilted. Her parents had died when she was 5, taking any explanations with them. The foster families who'd passed her between them had called her incidents, accidents, her strange dreams, nightmares. No one had ever suggested she might be something other than broken. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Kael's expression softened. The electricity when you're scared or angry, the way animals react to you. Dreams of running wild under the moon. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed his suspicions. Your parents never told you? My parents died when I was 5. The words came out flat, defensive. Car accident. Are you sure about that? The question hit her like a physical blow. The photograph that had driven her to run the claw marks on twisted metal, the investigators' faces carefully blank when they'd thought she wasn't looking. Her childhood memories were fractured, but she remembered her mother's eyes in the moments before the crash. Not human eyes, golden, like his. What am I? She asked, the words barely audible. Something rare, Kael said. Something worth protecting. He gestured toward the valley, spread below them. My pack controls this territory. We keep the balance between human and wild worlds. You could be safe here, pack. The word resonated in places she'd thought were empty, calling to instincts she'd never understood. But safety was an illusion she'd stopped believing in long ago. I can't. She shook her head, backing toward the cabin. People are looking for me. If I stay anywhere too long, they find me, person. And when they do, what? Seraphina met his gaze, and Kael saw the full depth of her terror. Bad things happen to good people. I won't let that happen here. Before he could respond, she'd vanished back into the cabin, the bar sliding home with finality, but her scent lingered in the mountain. Air, wild honey and sage, electricity and barely leashed power. Kael stood alone in the clearing, every instinct screaming at him to break down the door and claim what belonged to him. Instead, he pulled out his radio. Jasper, I need you to run a background check. Name Sarah Blake, though that's likely false. Also, he paused, staring at the cabin. Double security on all territory borders. We might have company coming. His mate was here. frightened and running. And Kael Thornwick had never failed to protect what was his. 3 days passed in careful surveillance. Kael found himself drawn to the mining camp repeatedly, using his ranger duties as cover while tracking his mysterious mate from a distance. Each glimpse of her through the cabin windows made his wolf more restless, more insistent that he claim what belonged to them. Seraphina, meanwhile, had settled into a routine of wary hypervigilance. She foraged in the early mornings when mist still clung to the peaks, supplementing the cabin's meager supplies with edible plants her foster mother had taught her to identify. During the day, she stayed inside, watching the forest through grimy windows for signs of pursuit. The dreams had returned worse than ever. In them, she ran through moonlit forests on 4 legs, her pack, her family racing beside her under star-drunk skies. She'd wake gasping, hands cramped as if they'd been claws, the phantom taste of fresh kill on her tongue. What am I? Ranger Thornwick's question echoed relentlessly. Her parents died when she was 5, leaving behind only fractured memories and a trust fund administered by lawyers who claimed to know nothing about her family's history. Every attempt to research her lineage hit dead ends, sealed records, bureaucratic walls that felt deliberately constructed. The package that had driven her to run lay hidden in her backpack, the doctored accident photo, and 3 others she hadn't shown anyone. Her father, mid-transformation, caught by what must have been a hunter's trail camera, her mother's eyes glowing gold in their wedding photo, and most damning, a hospital record showing her birth weight as unusual for gestational age, with notes about accelerated development and anomalous vital signs. Someone had been watching her family. Someone knew what they were. On the 4th morning, Seraphina emerged to find fresh venison hanging from the cabin's eaves, expertly field-dressed and still warm. No note, no sign of the provider. But the scent lingered: pine, leather, and something wild that made her pulse race. "Ranger Thornwick," she called to the forest. "I know you're watching." Kael emerged from behind a stand of aspens, hands raised peacefully. "Thought you might be getting tired of canned beans. I can't accept this." But her stomach betrayed her with a rumbling growl. 3 days of rationing had left her weak, though she'd never admit it. "It's not charity. Consider it a peace offering." He moved closer, and she noticed the careful way he approached, like someone used to dealing with skittish animals. "We need to talk, Sarah. Or whoever you really are. What makes you think that's not my name?" "Because I had it run through the system. Sarah Blake of Denver doesn't exist." Kael's expression was carefully neutral, but she caught the flash of disappointment in his eyes. "Want to try again?" Panic flickered through her. If he'd run her false identity and come up empty, how long before he tried other databases, other searches? The Witness Protection Program taught their people to layer identities, but no system was perfect. "Who are you really?" she countered. "Rangers don't normally camp out watching civilians for days." "Fair point." Kael sat on a fallen log, deliberately making himself smaller, less threatening. Kael Thornwick, 34, born in these mountains. My father was the previous head ranger before he died. I took over the position 5 years ago, officially speaking. And unofficially? Unofficially, I'm Alpha of the North Cascade Pack. 15 wolves, all sworn to protect this territory from both human and supernatural threats. His gaze met hers steadily. "Like whatever's hunting you." Seraphina's breath caught. "What do you know about what's hunting me?" "I know you've been running for years." The way you check sightlines, never sit with your back to a door, catalog every exit the moment you enter a space. That's trauma response. Learned behavior from someone who's survived multiple attempts on their life. The accuracy of his assessment chilled her. You're very observant for a park ranger. I'm very observant for an alpha whose territory you've brought danger into. His voice carried an edge now, the authority she'd sensed from their first meeting. My pack's safety depends on knowing every threat within 50 miles. So I'll ask again, who are you? And what did you do to make enemies powerful enough to forge government documents? I didn't do anything, she said. And for the first time, her voice cracked with exhaustion. That's the problem. I exist, and apparently that's crime enough. Kael's expression softened at her obvious distress. Tell me. I can't. Every time I've trusted someone with the truth, they've ended up dead or disappeared. She wrapped her arms around herself. Process. My college roommate asked too many questions about my accidents with electronics. Found her 3 weeks later, apparent suicide. My first boss at the bookstore started researching my family history after I mentioned looking for relatives. Heart attack at 32. No prior health issues. Jesus. Kael stood, taking a half step toward her before catching himself. You think telling people about your abilities is what gets them killed? I think someone is monitoring me, waiting to see who I trust, who I might tell my secrets to. And then they clean house. Her laugh was bitter. The only way to keep people safe is to keep them at distance. Pard, that's not living. That's just surviving. Surviving is all I know. They stood in silence, the weight of her isolation settling between them. Kael's wolf paced restlessly, every instinct screaming to protect this broken, beautiful woman who belonged to him. But the man understood that pushing too hard, too fast, would only drive her further away. The venison stays, he said finally. You're pack now, whether you know it or not. Pack takes care of pack. I'm not pack. I'm not anything. You're mine, he said. So quietly she almost missed it. My wolf recognized you the moment I caught your scent. Whatever you are, wherever you came from, you're my mate. That means you're under my protection now. Seraphina stared at him, mind reeling. Mate. The word resonated in her bones, called to instincts she'd spent her life suppressing, but accepting that connection meant accepting the risk that came with it. Your protection won't matter when they come, she whispered. They always come. Let them. Gold flashed in Kael's eyes. This time, they'll face more than one frightened woman with nowhere to run. They'll face an alpha and his pack on our territory, fighting for our own. For the first time in years, Seraphina felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Hope, small and fragile, but real. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need. I'll be close. He turned to leave, then paused. The name's really Seraphina, isn't it? Seraphina Blackthorn, she gasped. How did you? Your scent carries traces of your true name, your true self. Lies leave a bitter aftertaste. Kael's smile was gentle. Don't worry, that secret's safe with me. As he disappeared into the forest, Seraphina touched her lips, wondering if this was what it felt like to find home. A week later, Seraphina found herself walking the boundaries of what Kael called pack territory. The morning mist clung to ancient pines while she traced invisible borders marked by scent and instinct she was only beginning to understand. Her electrical abilities had stabilized since that first meeting, no longer sparking unpredictably at every emotional spike. "You're getting better at controlling it," Kael observed, appearing beside her with the silent grace that still made her jump. "Practice." She gestured to the small exercises she'd been attempting, lighting tinder with focused sparks, charging her dead phone battery, sending controlled pulses through metal objects. "When you're not busy being afraid, it's easier to direct." "Not afraid anymore?" Seraphina considered the question. Fear had been her constant companion for so long that its absence felt strange, like missing the weight of chains after they'd been removed. "Still afraid. But not of you." It was progress. Kael fell into step beside her as they continued along the mountain path, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but far enough to avoid triggering her flight response. "Jasper thinks you're a myth," he said after a comfortable silence. "You're second in command." "Yeah. Stormwolves haven't been seen in North America for over a century. Most of the pack assumed they were legend." Kael glanced at her sideways. "Then you showed up, calling lightning and making their electronics malfunction just by being nervous." "Stormwolves." The term felt right in ways she couldn't explain. "Is that what I am?" "What you are is the last of a bloodline that was hunted to near extinction." His voice hardened. "Stormwolves were the bridges between human and supernatural worlds. They could walk in both, understand both, translate between them when conflicts arose. Made them valuable allies and dangerous enemies." "What happened to them?" "Same thing that happens to anything rare and powerful. People got scared, greedy, or both. Hunters like the ones tracking you started eliminating bloodlines systematically. Your parents probably died protecting you, not in some random car accident." The words hit her like physical blows. All these years of guilt over their deaths, wondering if her childhood tantrums had somehow caused the crash, and it had been murder, targeted, deliberate murder. "I should have died with them," she whispered. "No." Kael's hand found her arm, gentle but firm. "You should have lived to fulfill your purpose." Stormwolves weren't just bridges between worlds, they were guardians of the balance. The supernatural community needs what you can offer. "I don't know how to offer anything. I've spent my whole life hiding." "Then it's time to learn." Over the following days, Kael began her education in earnest. He taught her to read scent trails, to interpret the subtle body language of his pack when they finally met her in small groups. Jasper Grimwald proved to be a serious young man with silver-shot hair and the cautious respect due a creature from legend. The others, Elena Riversong, Tobias Ironclaw, Vera Moonwhisper, welcomed her with varying degrees of curiosity and awe. "Stormwolves were our allies during the territory wars," Elena explained over a shared meal of fresh-caught trout. "My grandmother used to tell stories about Lydia Stormcaller, who prevented 3 separate conflicts between packs and human settlements. Course, that was back when humans still believed in magic," Tobias added. "Now they've got technology for everything we used to do naturally." Seraphina found herself relaxing into their easy camaraderie, the casual acceptance of supernatural abilities as normal parts of life. These wolves didn't flinch when she lit the campfire with controlled lightning, didn't whisper about accidents when she charged their phones during movie nights at Kael's cabin. "You're different when you're with them," Kael observed one evening as they walked back from another pack gathering. "Different how?" "More yourself. Like you're remembering who you were meant to be instead of who you had to become to survive." It was true. Around the pack, Seraphina felt pieces of herself awakening that had been dormant for decades. The way she could sense emotions in the air, interpret the electrical patterns of heartbeats and brain activity, understand the complex hierarchies and relationships that bound the wolves together. These were gifts, not curses. Your parents would be proud, Kael said quietly. You think so? I know so. Quote, you survived when you should have been destroyed, kept your abilities hidden when disclosure would have meant death, power, and now you're learning to trust again despite every reason to stay closed off. He stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. That takes incredible strength. Or incredible stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. Their gazes held, and Seraphina felt that electric pull again, stronger now that she understood what it meant. Powered is. The mate bond, according to Elena, was rare even among wolves. Most found partners they were compatible with, built relationships through choice and time. But true mates were two halves of the same soul, destined and inevitable. Kael, she began, unsure what she wanted to say. I know. His hand lifted to cup her cheek, thumb stroking across her skin. I can feel it too. The pull, the rightness. My wolf has been trying to claim you since the moment we met. What's stopping you? You've spent your life being hunted, controlled, manipulated by people who wanted to use or destroy you. His touch gentled. I won't be another person who takes your choices away, even if the bond between us is real. The words broke something loose in her chest, a knot of tension she'd carried so long it felt like part of her skeleton. Choice. When was the last time anyone had offered her genuine choice in anything that mattered? What if I chose you? She whispered. Then I'd spend the rest of my life making sure you never regretted it. Before she could lose her nerve, Seraphina rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, but when his arms came around her waist, she deepened the contact with a hunger that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, electricity danced along her skin in patterns that looked almost like runes. Is that normal? Kael asked, staring at the glowing symbols. Nothing about me is normal. Nothing about me is normal. Good. His smile was fierce. Normal is overrated. As they walked home together, neither noticed the scope glint from the ridge above, or the soft click of a camera's shutter capturing their embrace. 2 weeks of integration with the pack had transformed Seraphina in ways she'd never imagined possible. Her abilities grew stronger and more controlled daily, guided by instincts that felt like genetic memories awakening. She could track emotional states through bioelectrical patterns, communicate with electronic systems, even influence weather patterns on a small scale when her emotions ran high. More importantly, she was learning to trust. Try again, Kael encouraged, standing 20 feet away in the meadow behind his ranger station. But this time, don't fight the connection. Let the storm be part of you, not something you're trying to control. Seraphina closed her eyes, reaching for the roiling clouds that had been building all afternoon. In the past, her electrical abilities had been reactive, sparked by fear or anger. But Kael was teaching her to be proactive, to work with the natural electromagnetic forces instead of against them. Lightning answered her call, a controlled bolt that crackled between her palms before earthing safely through the metal rod Kael had installed for practice. The rush of power left her exhilarated rather than drained. Beautiful, Kael said, and she knew he wasn't just talking about the lightning. Their relationship had been building slowly, carefully. Kael respected her need for control over physical intimacy, never pushing beyond what she was ready for. But the mate bond grew stronger every day, an invisible thread connecting them across distance and time. "There's something I need to show you," he said, suddenly serious. He led her to his cabin, past the main room with its stone fireplace and rustic furniture, to a door she'd never seen him open. Inside lay a study lined with books, maps, and what looked like genealogical charts spanning multiple centuries, pack records, he explained, pulling down a leather-bound tome. Every alpha keeps detailed histories, bloodlines, territory agreements, alliance records. He opened to a page marked with a red ribbon. "This is about your family." Seraphina leaned over his shoulder, inhaling his scent of pine and wild places while she studied the elegant handwriting. The entry was dated 30 years ago. Alliance formed between North Cascade Pack and the Stormcaller bloodline. Thaddeus and Luna Blackthorn have agreed to serve as mediators in the upcoming territory disputes with the Eastern Packs. Their daughter, Seraphina, shows early signs of powerful storm abilities. The bloodline must be protected at all costs. Her breath caught. "Your pack knew my parents?" "My father made the alliance. You were supposed to be raised here, trained by our pack alongside theirs." Kael's voice was gentle. "When they died, the lawyers claimed you'd been placed in state care. My father searched for years but could never find you. Someone deliberately hid me." The implications crashed over her. All those foster families, the sealed records, the walls every time I tried to research my history. That someone wanted to make sure you never learned what you were, or came looking for allies. He turned the page, showing her another entry. "Look at this." The next notation was in different handwriting, dated just 5 years ago. "Reports confirm Seraphina Blackthorn survived childhood and is living under assumed identity in Denver. Agent Thorne recommends continued surveillance, but no direct contact until her abilities fully manifest." Choir. "The Covenant's plans require her to remain isolated and unaware until the time is right." Ice flooded her veins. "The Covenant. Who are they?" "I was hoping you could tell me." Kael's jaw was tight. "This entry was made after my father died, by someone who had access to our pack records. Someone on the inside." Before Seraphina could respond, a howl echoed across the valley. Not the normal evening song, but the sharp, urgent call that meant danger. Kael was on his feet instantly, reaching for the radio. "Alpha, we have a problem." Jasper's voice crackled through the static. "Unknown vehicles on the northern access road. Military-grade equipment, electromagnetic dampeners. They're coming fast." Seraphina felt the blood drain from her face. "They found me." "How many?" Kael demanded. 6 vehicles, at least 20 personnel, full tactical gear." A pause. "Boss, they've got silver rounds and what looks like electrical containment equipment." "They know what I am," Seraphina whispered. "They've been planning for this." Kael grabbed her shoulders. "Pack protocols. We evacuate to the deep territory caves, regroup, and plan counterattack." "No." She pulled away from him. "If I run, they'll tear apart your pack looking for me. People will die because of what I am, just like always. Then we fight." "With what? You said yourself these are professionals. Military training, specialized equipment, government resources." Her laugh was bitter. 15 werewolves against a hunter organization that's been exterminating supernatural bloodlines for generations. 14 werewolves. Kael corrected grimly. And one Stormwolf who's about to learn what she's really capable of. Outside, the sound of helicopters filled the air. Seraphina closed her eyes, reaching for the massive storm system that had been building over the mountains all week. If her family had died to keep her secret, the least she could do was make their sacrifice mean something. Lightning began to dance around her fingertips, but this time it felt different, bigger, like touching the raw power that moved between earth and sky. "Whatever you're thinking, don't," Kael said, recognizing the change in her electromagnetic signature. "We face this together." "Together," she agreed, taking his hand as the first tactical teams breached the tree line. The storm she'd been unconsciously building chose that moment to break, and Seraphina Blackthorn discovered exactly how much power ran in her veins. The first tactical team never made it past the tree line. Lightning struck with surgical precision, disabling their electronic equipment and sending them diving for cover as electromagnetic pulses fried their communications gear. But Seraphina could feel the drain. Already she was powerful, but she was also one person facing a small army. "Fall back to defensive positions," Kael commanded through his radio. "Standard pack tactics. Use the terrain." His wolves melted into the forest with practiced ease, becoming shadows among the trees. But even as they took position, more vehicles arrived, reinforcements that had clearly been waiting for her to reveal the full extent of her abilities. Seraphina Blackthorn, a voice called through a megaphone. "This is Agent Victoria Thorne, Department of Supernatural Affairs. You're surrounded. Surrender peacefully, and no one else has to be hurt. Department of Supernatural Affairs." Seraphina had never heard of such an organization, but the name sent chills down her spine. Government-sanctioned hunters. "How do they know my real name?" she whispered to Kael. "Someone told them." His expression was murderous. "Someone who had access to our pack records." A figure emerged from the tactical vehicles, a woman in her 40s, with silver-streaked hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Agent Thorne, presumably. She wore body armor designed to deflect electrical attacks and carried weapons that hummed with their own electromagnetic fields. "Your parents died protecting you from this moment," Thorne called. "Don't make their sacrifice meaningless by forcing us to eliminate your new pack as well." "My parents died because you murdered them," Seraphina shouted back, stepping into view despite Kael's restraining hand on her arm. "Your parents died because they refused to cooperate with the Covenant's greater purpose." Thorne's voice carried across the clearing with practiced authority. "The supernatural community cannot be allowed to exist in chaos. Order must be maintained, bloodlines controlled, dangerous abilities contained." "Contained or eliminated? That depends entirely on your cooperation." Seraphina felt Kael's tension through their bond. His wolf barely restrained from charging the humans who threatened his mate. But they were outgunned, outmanned, and facing enemies who had clearly studied their abilities extensively. "What kind of cooperation?" she asked, buying time. "The Covenant maintains balance between the human and supernatural worlds. Stormwolves were integral to that balance, once mediators, translators, enforcers when necessary." Thorne gestured to the tactical teams surrounding them. "We offer you the same role your ancestors held, serving the greater good. As your prisoner. As our asset. Willing cooperation yields better results than forced compliance, but the end result is the same. You will serve the Covenant's purposes, Seraphina. The only question is how much collateral damage occurs in the process." Around them, Seraphina could sense the pack in position, waiting for Kael's signal. But she could also sense the hunters' electromagnetic signatures, at least 30 personnel, with military-grade equipment and apparent immunity to her electrical abilities. You know, she said conversationally, there's something you should understand about stormwolves, which is, we don't just control lightning. Seraphina reached deeper into her power than she'd ever dared before, touching the massive electrical grid that ran beneath the Earth's surface. All electrical systems, including the ones that keep your equipment functioning. Every piece of electronic equipment within a mile radius died simultaneously. Night vision goggles went dark. Communication systems cut to static. Vehicle engines died with mechanical gasps. Even the hunters' specialized weapons powered down with disappointed whines. Now! Kael roared. The pack attacked with coordinated precision, 14 wolves moving like a single organism through the suddenly dark forest. Their night vision gave them overwhelming advantage over the blinded humans, and their knowledge of the terrain turned the battle into a rout. But Agent Thorn was already falling back, speaking into an old-fashioned radio that ran on frequencies Seraphina couldn't affect. Protocol. She's more powerful than the projections indicated, Thorn reported. Recommend immediate escalation to Protocol 7. Seraphina didn't know what Protocol 7 was, but the fear in Thorn's voice suggested it wouldn't be pleasant. She reached for her power again, intending to stop the transmission, but found herself swaying as exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Easy, Kael said, catching her as her knees buckled. You've pushed too hard too fast. They're calling for reinforcements, she panted. Something called Protocol 7. His face went pale. We need to move, now. What's Protocol 7? Scorched earth, he said grimly. If they can't capture you, they'll eliminate you and anyone who might harbor you, including every supernatural being within 50 miles. Around them, his pack was finishing the cleanup, zip-tying unconscious hunters and confiscating their equipment. But Seraphina could hear the distant sound of more helicopters approaching, and these carried a different electromagnetic signature, bigger, more powerful, definitely military. They're going to bomb us, she realized. Not if we're not here when they arrive. Kael keyed his radio. All units fall back to Alpha Protocol positions, deep territory, maximum dispersal. Move now. But as his pack began their tactical retreat, Seraphina made a choice that would change everything. No, she said, stepping away from him. I won't run anymore. Seraphina. They've been controlling my life since I was 5 years old. Hiding me, hunting me, using me as a weapon against my own kind. Lightning began to dance around her again, but this time it felt different. Cleaner, like she'd finally stopped fighting her own nature. I'm done being afraid. Then we faced them together. She looked at him, this man who had given her belonging, safety, the chance to be herself. Who was willing to risk his pack, his life, everything he'd built to protect her. I love you, she said simply. I love you too. His eyes began to glow gold. Mates until the stars burn out. Mates until the stars burn out, she agreed. And then she reached for every electrical system within 100 miles, preparing to show the Covenant exactly why stormwolves had once been considered gods. Passer. The helicopters approaching weren't military. They were something worse. As they drew closer, Seraphina could sense the electromagnetic signatures of equipment she'd never encountered before, devices that seemed to absorb electrical energy rather than being vulnerable to it. Harvester tech, Kael said, recognizing her confusion. They've been developing it specifically for stormwolves. Instead of being disrupted by your abilities, it feeds on them. How do you know that? His expression grew haunted. Because I've seen it before. 5 years ago, when they came for the last Stormwolf in the Yellowstone territory. Before Seraphina could ask what had happened in Yellowstone, a new voice crackled through the old radio. Agent Thorne had been using deeper, more authoritative, carrying the weight of absolute command. This is Director Marcus Ashford, Covenant Operations. Agent Thorne, report status. Subject has manifested beyond projected parameters, sir. She's demonstrated grid-level electrical manipulation and is operating with PAC support. Local team has been neutralized. Understood. Initiating Protocol 7 Alpha. Even through the static, Seraphina could hear the coldness in his voice. This wasn't someone who saw her as a person to be negotiated with. She was a problem to be solved, preferably permanently. Agent Thorne, withdraw your teams to safe distance. Harvester units are going live in 60 seconds. The helicopters settled into position around the valley, forming a perfect containment perimeter. As Seraphina watched, metallic pods deployed from their undercarriages, embedding themselves in the ground at strategic points. When they activated, the electromagnetic drain was immediate and overwhelming. Her abilities didn't just stop working, they began flowing out of her like blood from an open wound, pulled into the harvester devices with mechanical hunger. Seraphina? Kael caught her as she collapsed, her body going into shock as decades of accumulated storm energy was forcibly extracted. Stay with me. Can't stop it, she gasped. The harvesters were pulling not just her electrical abilities, but the very bioelectrical impulses that kept her heart beating, her brain functioning. Power? They weren't just containing her. They were slowly killing her. All units, converge on my position, Kael commanded, but his pack was already moving. 14 wolves, charging the harvester positions with desperate fury. Silver bullets met them, and Seraphina screamed as she felt pack members fall through their shared bonds. Stop, she tried to call to them. It's not worth it. But they didn't stop. Elena Riversong threw herself at one of the devices, her claws tearing at metal casings even as silver rounds tore through her body. City. Tobias Ironclaw managed to destroy a harvester with his dying breath, the explosion sending Covenant soldiers scrambling for cover. You're killing them, Seraphina sobbed, watching her new family die for her freedom. They're killing themselves. Director Ashford's voice corrected through the radio. All of this could have been avoided if you'd simply cooperated from the beginning. The Covenant doesn't enjoy eliminating supernatural beings, Miss Blackthorn. We prefer partnership. Partnership. The word tasted like poison. You mean slavery. I mean order. For 3 centuries, the Covenant has maintained the balance between human and supernatural worlds. We prevent exposure, control dangerous bloodlines, and ensure that beings like yourself serve the greater good, rather than following destructive impulses. Through her failing vision, Seraphina could see the tactical teams regrouping, preparing to move in for capture now that her abilities were neutralized. But she could also see something else, a figure moving through the trees with inhuman speed and precision, too fast for human eyes to track. Not one of Kael's wolves. This signature was different, older, carrying the weight of centuries. You speak of balance, Director Ashford. A new voice called across the valley, rich with authority and barely contained rage. Yet you slaughter children in the name of order. The figure stepped into the clearing, and Seraphina's breath caught. He was tall, pale, elegant, in the way of predators who had no natural enemies. When he smiled, fangs glinted in the moonlight. Vampire. Agent Thorne breathed into her radio. Sir, we have a vampire on site, possible ancient. Lucian Dracule. Director Ashford's voice carried a new tension. This doesn't concern you or your kind, doesn't it? The vampire Lucian tilted his head with predatory interest. You're harvesting one of the last storm wolves. These beings served as mediators between all supernatural communities, including mine. Their extinction affects the entire supernatural world. The vampire councils agreed to the Covenant's authority decades ago. The councils agreed to coexist. They did not agree to stand by while you commit genocide. Lucian's gaze found Seraphina, and she saw something unexpected there, genuine concern. Hello, child. Your grandmother sent me. My grandmother? Helena Stormcaller. She didn't die in that car crash, as the Covenant claimed. His fangs extended fully as he turned back to the tactical teams. She's been searching for you for 23 years, and she's quite displeased with your current treatment. One of the harvester devices exploded without warning, its metal housing crumbling as if aged centuries in seconds. Then another, and another. Temporal manipulation, Agent Thorne reported, fear clear in her voice now. He's accelerating the decay rate of our equipment. All units, silver rounds, aim for center mass, Director Ashford commanded. Lucian laughed, the sound carrying across the valley like broken glass. Silver is for werewolves, Director. You'll need something much more substantial for me. He moved like liquid shadow, faster than even Seraphina's enhanced perception could follow. Tactical teams, scattered as their equipment aged to uselessness in seconds, centuries of entropy compressed into moments. But the distraction came at a cost. With the harvesters failing, Seraphina's abilities snapped back into her body like a released rubber band. The sudden influx of power more than her weakened system could handle. Lightning exploded outward from her position, uncontrolled and massive. The storm overhead answered her distress call, and suddenly the entire valley was lit by continuous electrical discharge. Seraphina, you have to control it, Kael shouted over the thunder. If you don't, you'll kill everyone here, us included. Problems. She tried, but after the forced draining and sudden return of power, her abilities were running wild. Every emotion fed the storm, and right now she was feeling everything: grief for the pack members who'd died, rage at the Covenant, terror at the forces hunting her, and love for the man holding her as reality went electric around them. I can't, she gasped. It's too much. Then let me help, Lucian said, suddenly beside them despite the chaos. Stormwolves were never meant to bear their power alone. You need an anchor. Before she could ask what he meant, the vampire placed one pale hand on her forehead and another on Kael's chest. What are you doing? Kael demanded. Creating a proper bond, Lucian said. The mate connection between you is strong but incomplete. She needs your stability. You need her power. Together, you can control what neither could manage alone. Power flowed between them, the mate bond suddenly blazing with new intensity. Seraphina felt Kael's wolf reach for her storm, not trying to contain it but to run alongside it, to give it direction and purpose. The chaos overhead began to organize, random lightning strikes becoming precise, targeted bolts that took out the remaining harvester devices with surgical accuracy. Impossible. Director Ashford's voice crackled through the failing radios. Stormwolves can't achieve that level of precision without decades of training. Tade power. She's not alone anymore, Lucian said, though whether he was speaking to the director or to them, Seraphina couldn't tell. As the last harvester died, the Covenant helicopters began pulling back, recognizing a battle they couldn't win. "This isn't over, Miss Blackthorn," Director Ashford's voice promised. "The Covenant has been dealing with your kind for 3 centuries. We will find a way to contain you." But for the moment, they were gone, leaving behind only scattered equipment and the bodies of pack members who died fighting for her freedom. "I'm sorry," Seraphina whispered to Kael as they surveyed the damage. "This is my fault." "No," he said firmly. "This is their fault. And now we know we're not fighting this alone." Lucian nodded gravely. "Your grandmother has been building alliances for decades, preparing for the day you would be found. The vampire councils, several dragon courts, even some of the Fae houses have agreed to stand against Covenant expansion. Why? Because balance isn't maintained through oppression, child. It's maintained through cooperation. And that," he smiled, fangs glinting, "requires all the voices at the table, including yours." For the first time since this all began, Seraphina felt something she'd never experienced before. The weight of community, of belonging not just to one pack, but to an entire supernatural world that had been waiting for her to come home. The aftermath of the battle left the valley eerily quiet, broken only by the soft whimpers of wounded pack members and the distant sound of Covenant helicopters retreating. Seraphina knelt beside Elena Riversong, whose breathing was shallow and labored from silver poisoning. "Hold on," she whispered, placing her hands over the worst wounds. "Let me try something." Electrical healing wasn't something she'd ever attempted, but the mate bond with Kael had opened new pathways in her abilities. She could sense the silver fragments embedded in Elena's tissue, their toxic presence disrupting natural healing processes. With surgical precision, she began using controlled electromagnetic pulses to extract the foreign metal. "Careful," Lucian advised, watching her work with ancient eyes. "Silver poisoning in werewolves is complex. Too much electrical stimulation can cause cardiac arrest." But Seraphina could feel Elena's bioelectrical patterns, the way her heart struggled against the silver's influence. With infinite patience, she drew out each fragment, using her abilities like the world's most precise surgical instruments. When Elena's eyes fluttered open 20 minutes later, the entire surviving pack stared in wonder. "That's impossible," Jasper breathed. "No one recovers from silver poisoning that advanced." "Stormwolves were healers as well as warriors," Lucian explained. "The bioelectrical manipulation that allows them to control weather also grants them unprecedented medical abilities. Your mate, Alpha, is far more valuable than even the Covenant realizes." Kael's arm tightened around Seraphina's waist. "Which is why they'll never stop hunting her." "Actually," Lucian said, producing an antique phone from his coat, "that may no longer be an issue. Helena? Yes, it's me. I have her." The conversation that followed was brief but intense, conducted in a language Seraphina didn't recognize, but somehow understood the formal dialect used by supernatural communities for official communications. Your grandmother will arrive tomorrow night, Lucian announced, along with representatives from the major supernatural councils. It seems Director Ashford has overplayed his hand. What do you mean? The Covenant's authority exists by consensus, not divine right. They maintain power because the supernatural communities allow it, in exchange for protection from human discovery and territorial disputes. Lucian's smile was predatory, but attacking a Stormwolf under pack protection, with vampire witnesses, constitutes a violation of the Prague Accords. Seraphina frowned. Prague Accords? 1823. Kael supplied. The treaty that established modern supernatural law. Stormwolves were signatory representatives, which means you have diplomatic immunity. The Covenant can't legally touch her without council approval, Lucian confirmed, and after tonight's display, they'll never get it. Stormwolves are too valuable as mediators to risk extinction. End quote. Duncombe to marketations and with a soar. Duncombe. End quote. As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of approaching aircraft filled the valley again. But these weren't the military helicopters of the Covenant. These moved with the whisper-quiet efficiency of supernatural technology. Friends of yours? Kael asked tensely. Lucian nodded. The cavalry, as it were. 3 sleek aircraft settled into the clearing, their hulls bearing the interlocking symbols of the major supernatural councils. From the first emerged a woman who took Seraphina's breath away, tall, silver-haired, with storm-gray eyes identical to her own. Grandmother, Seraphina whispered. Helena's stormcaller crossed the distance between them in quick, urgent strides, pulling Seraphina into an embrace that crackled with electrical resonance. For the first time in 23 years, Seraphina felt the presence of someone who shared her exact abilities, whose bioelectrical signature harmonized perfectly with her own. My darling girl, Helena murmured, tears streaming down her face. I never stopped looking for you. They told me you died in the crash. I nearly did. Your parents. They sacrificed themselves to give me time to escape with you. But the Covenant had prepared for that possibility. They separated us during the evacuation, told me you'd been killed. Helena's voice hardened. By the time I discovered the truth, you'd vanished into their foster system under an assumed identity. From the other aircraft came figures that belonged in mythology textbooks, a dragon in human form, whose eyes held the weight of millennia, fae nobles, whose beauty was sharp enough to cut, shapeshifters whose animal natures flickered just beneath perfectly human facades. Quote, the Council of 12. Lucian explained quietly. They haven't convened in person for over a century. Helena stepped back to study Seraphina with a grandmother's critical eye. You're stronger than I expected. Untrained, but the raw power is remarkable. She glanced at Kael, nostrils flaring slightly. And properly mated, I see. Good. Stormwolves were never meant to stand alone. The Covenant won't give up, Seraphina said. Director Ashford made that clear. Director Ashford, said a new voice, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous, has exceeded his authority. The speaker was the dragon, though in human form he looked like a businessman in an expensive suit. Only his eyes betrayed his true nature, vertical pupils that missed nothing, the gold color of hoarded treasure. Lord Pyraxis. Helena inclined her head respectfully. Thank you for coming. The Council takes treaty violations seriously, Pyraxis replied. The Covenant exists to maintain balance, not to commit genocide against protected bloodlines. Director Ashford will answer for tonight's actions. What happens now? Kael asked, his alpha instincts clearly struggling with the presence of so many apex predators in his territory. Now, said one of the Fae, her voice carrying the rustle of autumn leaves. We remind the human world why the old treaties exist. Some lines should never be crossed. Helena placed a protective hand on Seraphina's shoulder. You have 3 choices, granddaughter. Return with me to the hidden communities, where you'll be safe but isolated from the human world. Accept Covenant custody and serve their agenda. Or, she smiled, help us build something new. What kind of new? A new balance. The Covenant's approach is failing too much suppression, too much fear. The supernatural world needs advocates who can walk in both realms, translate between them, the conflict, prevent the kind of conflict that would destroy everything we've built. Seraphina looked around the clearing at Kael and his surviving pack members, at the ancient powers gathered to protect her, at the evidence of battle that had nearly killed everyone she'd come to love. Quote, I'm tired of running, she said finally, and I'm tired of hiding. If there's a way to use what I am to prevent others from suffering what I've suffered. Helena confirmed. But it won't be safe. The Covenant won't simply accept a loss of power. They'll fight. Then we'll fight back, Kael said, his wolf gleaming gold in his eyes. The pack stands with our alpha's mate, Prathas. As do the vampire councils, Lucian added. The dragon courts? Pyraxis confirmed. The autumn fae. The leaf-voiced woman agreed. One by one, the supernatural representatives pledged their support, creating an alliance that hadn't existed since the Dark Ages. At the center of it all stood Seraphina Blackthorn, no longer running, no longer hiding, but finally ready to claim her birthright as a bridge between worlds. Director Ashford is going to regret waking us up, Helena said with a smile that promised storms on the horizon. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the peaks gold and rose, Seraphina felt something she'd never experienced before, the certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the people who were meant to stand beside her. The war with the Covenant was just beginning, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't facing it alone. The council meeting convened in Kael's ranger station, though the small cabin had been expanded overnight through what Helena called dimensional adjustment. Apparently, Stormwolves weren't the only ones with reality-bending abilities. The interior now resembled a grand hall, with seating for representatives from a dozen supernatural communities. Pyraxis. The evidence is undeniable, Lord Pyraxis stated, his dragon nature making the very air shimmer with heat. The Covenant has violated the Prague Accords in multiple ways, attacking a protected bloodline, operating without council oversight, attempting genocide against Stormwolves. Director Ashford claims emergency authority, countered Councilwoman Vera Nightwhisper, one of the few Covenant sympathizers present. He argues that an untrained Stormwolf poses a clear and present danger to exposure protocols. Helena's laugh could have powered half the mountain. My granddaughter has spent 23 years hiding her abilities so effectively that the Covenant's own surveillance network couldn't locate her. Hardly the behavior of someone seeking exposure. Seraphina sat between Kael and her grandmother, still processing the revelations of the past 24 hours. The supernatural world was vast, complex, governed by treaties and traditions that predated most human civilizations. And at the center of it all, Stormwolves had once served as diplomats, mediators, the bridges between communities that might otherwise have destroyed each other. "The question isn't Miss Blackthorn's past behavior," said Councilman Marcus Shadowmere, leader of the North American Shapeshifter Alliance. "It's her future role. Stormwolves were instrumental in creating the current balance. With her abilities fully manifested, she could serve that role again. Or," Vera Nightwhisper said coldly, "she could destabilize everything. Untrained power is dangerous power, regardless of bloodline. Which is why she won't remain untrained." Helena replied, "I propose formal recognition of Seraphina Blackthorn as Stormcaller of the North American territories, with full diplomatic status and the protection that entails." The title sent electric shivers down Seraphina's spine. Stormcaller, the same title her grandmother held, the same role her parents had died to protect. "I haven't agreed to anything yet," she said quietly, her words carrying across the expanded space with unusual clarity. 24 hours ago, I was hiding in an abandoned cabin, trying to stay invisible. Now you're asking me to become some kind of supernatural diplomat? We're asking you to become what you were born to be," Helena said gently. "But the choice is yours. It always has been." Before Seraphina could respond, alarms began blaring outside. Through the dimensional walls, they could see Covenant vehicles surrounding the Ranger station, more than had been present during the previous battle. "Director Ashford," Kael growled, his alpha instincts fully engaged. "He's brought an army." "Ms. Blackthorn," Director Ashford's voice boomed through loudspeakers, "you are harboring fugitives from Covenant justice. Surrender yourself and the vampire Lucian Dracul, and the others will be spared." "Fugitives?" Seraphina looked to Helena in confusion. "Lucian has been wanted by the Covenant for over a century," her grandmother explained grimly. "He's been protecting Stormwolf descendants, hiding them from Covenant recruitment efforts. They consider him a terrorist. And you're now guilty by association," Lord Pyraxis added. "The moment you accepted our protection, you became an enemy of their order." Through the windows, Seraphina could see the scale of the force arrayed against them. Not just tactical teams this time, but full military units with armor, artillery, and what looked like supernatural containment equipment. Director Ashford hadn't come to negotiate. He'd come to end the problem permanently. "They mean to kill us all," Jasper said, his pack bond carrying the scent of fear and determination in equal measure. "Let them try," Kael replied. But even his alpha confidence couldn't hide the fact that they were vastly outnumbered. "There is another option," Helena said quietly. She turned to Seraphina with eyes full of ancient sorrow. "The Stormcaller inheritance. It's been passed down through our bloodline for over 1,000 years, waiting for the right moment." "What inheritance?" Helena placed her hands on Seraphina's shoulders, and suddenly the air crackled with power that made everyone in the room step back. The accumulated strength of every Stormwolf who ever lived. Their abilities, their knowledge, their courage, all of it stored in the bloodline, waiting for the one who would need it most. "The cost?" Seraphina asked, "because power like that always came with a price." "Your grandmother's life," Lord Pyraxis said solemnly. "The transfer burns out the donor completely. It's why the inheritance has never been used. The last Stormwolf in each generation has always chosen death over leaving their descendants without guidance." No. Seraphina pulled away from Helena's touch. I won't let you die for me. Darling girl, Helena said with infinite tenderness. I've been dying since the day I lost you. This would give my death meaning. Outside, the Covenant forces were taking position, preparing for an assault that would level everything within miles. Seraphina could sense their electromagnetic signatures. Hundreds of soldiers, dozens of vehicles, weapons that hummed with anti-supernatural frequencies. There has to be another way, she insisted. There is, Kael said suddenly. The pack bond. If Helena transfers the inheritance through me, instead of directly to you, the load gets distributed. I can handle the burnout. That would kill you, Seraphina protested. Maybe, or maybe an alpha's constitution is strong enough to survive it. His amber eyes met hers steadily. By their way, you'll have the power to protect everyone here. I can't ask you to, and had. Cousin for Marx is You're not asking. I'm choosing. Kael took her hand, their mate bond flaring with shared determination. Mates until the stars burn out, remember? Helena nodded approvingly. It could work. The alpha bond might provide enough stability to prevent fatal burnout. She paused. But there are no guarantees. Through the loudspeakers, Director Ashford's voice carried a new urgency. You have 60 seconds to surrender before we begin bombardment. This is your final warning. Seraphina looked around the room at faces that had become dear to her in such a short time. The pack that had welcomed her, the grandmother she'd thought was dead, the ancient powers who had pledged their support, all of them willing to die rather than let the Covenant continue its reign of fear. Do it, she said. Helena and Kael joined hands with her, forming a triangle of connection. Power began to flow not just Helena's abilities, but the accumulated strength of centuries of Stormwolves. Seraphina felt their memories, their knowledge, their desperate hope that someday their sacrifice would matter. The inheritance blazed through the mate bond like liquid lightning. Kael screamed as supernatural power beyond imagining coursed through his system, his wolf form flickering in and out of existence as his body struggled to contain energies it was never meant to hold. But he held on. Through sheer force of will and alpha stubbornness, he held on long enough for the transfer to complete. When the light faded, Helena Stormcaller was gone, her life force spent in the ultimate gift to her granddaughter. But Kael lived, though his hair had gone silver at the temples and his eyes now held flecks of storm cloud gray. And Seraphina. Seraphina blazed with power that made the air itself electric. The accumulated abilities of 1,000 storm wolves flowed through her veins, waiting to be unleashed. Time's up, Director Ashford announced. The bombardment began. Seraphina rose to meet it, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The first artillery shell never reached the ranger station. Lightning intercepted it mid-flight, a precision strike that detonated the explosive harmlessly in the air. Then another, and another, until the sky above the valley blazed with continuous electrical discharge as Seraphina's inherited power met the Covenant's assault. But this wasn't the wild, uncontrolled storm of her awakening. The accumulated knowledge of 1,000 storm wolves guided her every move, centuries of experience flowing through the inherited memories now blazing in her mind. She was no longer just Seraphina Blackthorn. She was the Stormcaller, heir to a legacy that predated human civilization. Impossible. Director Ashford's voice crackled through the static-filled communications. No single Stormwolf can maintain that level of output. She's not single anymore, Lucian observed, watching through the dimensional windows, as Seraphina's power painted the sky in shades of electric blue. She carries her entire bloodline now. The Covenant forces tried to adapt, switching to electromagnetic pulse weapons designed to disrupt her abilities. But Seraphina absorbed the EMPs like a starving person devouring a feast, turning their own weapons into power sources that made her stronger with each attack. "Fall back to defensive positions," Director Ashford commanded. "Activate the null field generators." That was when things got truly interesting. The null field devices were the Covenant's most advanced technology machines that created areas of absolute supernatural suppression, zones where no paranormal ability could function. They'd been developed specifically for situations like this, when a supernatural being became too powerful to contain through conventional means. As the generators powered up, creating expanding bubbles of null space, even the ancient council members looked concerned. "Those devices could suppress all of us," Lord Pyraxis warned. "If they manage to establish a full perimeter." "They won't," Seraphina said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with the electrical grid beneath the earth itself. "Because they fundamentally misunderstand what I am." She stepped outside, no longer hiding behind the dimensional protections of the expanded cabin. The moment the null field touched her, her electrical abilities did indeed shut down for about 3 seconds. Then they blazed back to life, stronger than before. "The null generators run on electrical power," she explained to the stunned Covenant forces. "And I don't just control electricity, I am electricity. You can't suppress me with machines that need power to function." One by one, the null generators overloaded and exploded as she turned their own energy sources against them. The supernatural suppression fields collapsed, leaving the Covenant forces facing enemies they could no longer contain. That was when Director Ashford made his fatal mistake. "If we can't contain her, we'll expose her," he announced through the loudspeakers. "Attention, people of Washington State. You are witnessing an attack by supernatural terrorists against federal agents. The creature calling herself Seraphina Blackthorn is not human." Emergency broadcasts began flooding radio and television stations throughout the region. Cell phone networks carried video feeds of the battle, showing Seraphina wreathed in lightning as she faced down military vehicles. The footage was undeniable, impossible to dismiss as special effects or hoaxes. For the first time in centuries, the supernatural world was being forced into the light. "He's trying to start a war," Kael realized, his enhanced senses picking up the electromagnetic signatures of news crews mobilizing throughout the region. Forceful exposure then claimed justification for genocide. A war. Seraphina agreed, her inherited memories showing her similar moments throughout history. Times when fear and ignorance had led to massacres that decimated entire supernatural communities. Unless we give them something else to focus on. She reached out with her abilities, touching every camera, every broadcast system, every digital device within 100 miles. Instead of showing a battle, they would show something else entirely. The footage changed. Instead of military vehicles and explosions, viewers saw something unprecedented. Supernatural beings working together to protect human communities from natural disasters. Stormwolves redirecting hurricanes away from populated areas. Dragons using their fire to contain forest blazes. Vampires using their speed to rescue people from car accidents. shapeshifters serving as search and rescue teams in wilderness areas. Decades of hidden service, compiled from security cameras, traffic cams, and satellite feeds that the supernatural communities had thought were safely erased. But Seraphina's abilities let her reach into archived data that even the Covenant didn't know existed, showing the world a truth they'd never been allowed to see. This is what we really are. Her voice carried through every speaker, every device, every means of communication in the region. We're not your enemies. We're your neighbors, your protectors, your partners in keeping the world balanced and safe. The real enemy is the organization that's been hiding this truth from you, that's been using fear to justify hunting us down like animals. And the public response was immediate and overwhelmingly supportive. Power. Social media exploded with messages of gratitude, wonder, and demands to know more about these hidden protectors. The narrative that Director Ashford had tried to create supernatural beings as threats to be eliminated crumbled in the face of evidence, showing decades of secret service to humanity. But the Covenant wasn't ready to surrender. If exposure is inevitable, Director Ashford announced grimly, then we'll ensure it serves our purposes. All units. Protocol Omega. Eliminate all supernatural beings present, regardless of collateral damage. Protocol Omega. Seraphina realized through her inherited memories was the Covenant's final contingency, scorched earth tactics that would eliminate everyone present, human and supernatural alike, then blame the carnage on supernatural aggression. The remaining Covenant forces opened fire with everything they had, no longer trying to capture or contain but simply to destroy. Artillery shells rained down on the valley, while military aircraft strafed the forest with incendiary rounds. Enough, Seraphina said. The word carried across the battlefield with the force of a thunderclap, backed by the accumulated authority of every Stormwolf who had ever lived. Lightning erupted from her position, not in chaotic bursts, but in perfectly controlled strikes that disabled every Covenant vehicle simultaneously. Then she reached deeper into her power than she'd ever dared before, touching the fundamental electromagnetic forces that held atoms together. Every piece of Covenant equipment began to age rapidly, decades of entropy compressed into moments. Metal corroded, plastic crumbled, electronic systems failed, as she accelerated time itself for anything bearing the Covenant's symbol. Within minutes, their high-tech army had been reduced to scrap metal and confused soldiers standing in the ruins of their equipment. Power. Director Ashford, Seraphina called, her voice carrying impossible distances. By the authority granted to me by the supernatural communities of North America, I hereby place you under arrest for crimes against the Prague Accords. You will stand trial before the Council of 12. But when the smoke cleared, Director Ashford was nowhere to be found. He'd vanished during the chaos, along with several of his top agents, and whatever classified data they could carry. He'll be back, Lord Pyraxis warned. Men like that don't surrender easily. Let him come, Seraphina replied, still blazing with inherited power. Next time, we'll be ready. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. The supernatural world had been revealed, and now they had to figure out how to live in the light. The aftermath of the battle brought an influx of visitors that transformed the North Cascade Mountains into the unofficial capital of supernatural human relations. News crews, government officials, scientists, and curiosity seekers all made pilgrimages to the valley where the hidden world had been revealed. But more importantly, It brought representatives from every supernatural community in North America. The vote is unanimous. Lord Pyraxis announced at the emergency council session convened 1 week after the battle. Seraphina Blackthorn is hereby recognized as Stormcaller of the North American territories, with full diplomatic authority to negotiate on behalf of all supernatural communities. The title came with responsibilities that terrified her more than facing down the Covenant army had. She was now the primary liaison between the supernatural world and human governments, tasked with negotiating treaties, territorial agreements, and integration protocols that would reshape civilization itself. "I still don't understand why it has to be me," she confessed to Kael that evening, as they walked through the forest that had become her birthright. "Because you're the only one who's lived in both worlds without losing yourself to either," he replied, his hand warm in hers. "You understand human fear because you've experienced it. You understand supernatural power because you've inherited it. And you understand the cost of keeping them separate because you've paid that price." Their mate bond had evolved since the inheritance transfer. Kael now carried traces of Stormwolf abilities, while Seraphina had gained some of his alpha instincts for pack dynamics. They were becoming something new, a hybrid leadership that could bridge not just human and supernatural worlds, but the various supernatural communities that had spent centuries in careful isolation from each other. "The integration protocols are working better than expected," Jasper reported during their weekly pack meeting. As Seraphina's second in command, the role had evolved naturally from his position as Kael's lieutenant. He coordinated between the expanded pack and the various supernatural delegations taking up permanent residence in their territory. "The Canadian Dragon Court has agreed to the Mineral Rights Treaty," Elena added. She'd recovered completely from her silver poisoning and now served as the pack's primary negotiator with shapeshifter communities. "In exchange for exclusive mining rights to 3 mountain peaks, they'll provide aerial reconnaissance for the entire Northwestern Territory." The pack itself had grown from 14 wolves to over 60, as lone wolves and displaced packs sought the safety of official diplomatic territory. But they'd also gained non-wolf members, vampires seeking alliance protection, displaced fae looking for new courts, even a few dragons, too young to join established territories. "Diversity training is going well," Vera Moonwhisper reported with a straight face that couldn't quite hide her amusement. "Though the vampires are still struggling with pack howling protocols, integration hadn't been without challenges. Human governments were struggling to adapt legal frameworks that had never contemplated supernatural citizens. Religious communities were grappling with theological questions about beings that predated their sacred texts. Scientific establishments were rewriting fundamental assumptions about biology, physics, and the nature of reality itself. But it was working. "The exposure has actually made us safer," Lucian observed during one of his regular visits. "Hard to hunt what's hidden when everyone knows we exist, and most people support our rights." The Covenant's attempted narrative of supernatural beings as threats had backfired spectacularly. Public opinion strongly favored integration, especially after decades of Secret Service were revealed. Polls showed that over 70% of Americans supported full citizenship rights for supernatural beings, while only 15% backed the Covenant's elimination agenda. "Speaking of the Covenant," Seraphina said, settling into her chair at the head of what had once been Kael's simple ranger station, and was now the de facto capital of supernatural North America. "Any word on Ashford's whereabouts?" "Power. He's gone underground, Lucian replied grimly. Literally, in some cases. We've tracked Covenant remnants to several deep bunker facilities, but they're heavily shielded against supernatural surveillance. They're regrouping, Kael said. Planning something bigger. Let them plan, Seraphina replied, her inherited memories providing perspective that spanned centuries. Stormwolves have faced extinction before and survived. We won't be caught unprepared again. Helena's spirit materialized beside the fireplace. One of the unexpected benefits of the inheritance transfer was that previous storm callers could manifest as advisory spirits. During times of crisis, granddaughter. Helena's translucent form flickered with urgency. The Covenant has made contact with international hunter organizations. Ashford is trying to create a global alliance against supernatural communities. How global? Seraphina asked, already dreading the answer. European Hunters Guild, the Asian Purification Society, South American Silver Dawn. Every major anti-supernatural organization is being contacted. Helena's form shimmered with distress. They're offering shared technology, combined resources, and a unified strategy for what they're calling the final solution, power. The words sent ice through Seraphina's veins. She'd learned about that phrase in history classes, never imagining it would be applied to her own kind. How long do we have? Kael asked, his alpha instincts already calculating defensive strategies. Weeks, perhaps months. These organizations have spent centuries as rivals. Building trust between them will take time. Helena's expression softened. But when they do unite, they'll come with everything they have. Then we'd better make sure we're ready, Seraphina said. The next morning brought an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from supernatural communities across the globe began arriving. Australian were-dingo packs, Scottish selkie pods, African were-hyena clans, Japanese kitsune courts. The valley that had once hidden a single pack now hosted the largest supernatural conclave in recorded history. The irony is beautiful. Lord Pyraxis observed as they watched delegations set up camps throughout the expanded territory. Ashford's attempt to unite our enemies has united us instead. 6 months after the battle that changed everything, the North Cascade Mountains prepared for their first official supernatural human integration ceremony. Representatives from every major world government would attend, along with leaders from supernatural communities spanning 6 continents. But for Seraphina, the most important aspect wasn't the political implications, it was personal. Are you nervous? Vera Moonwhisper asked as she helped Seraphina prepare for the ceremony. The pack's spiritual advisor had become an expert in cross-cultural wedding traditions, necessary when the bride was a Stormwolf and the groom was an alpha werewolf, with guests ranging from ancient dragons to modern politicians. Terrified, Seraphina admitted, adjusting the circlet of silver and storm glass that marked her status as storm caller. Not of marrying Kael, that part feels as natural as breathing, but of everything else. The responsibilities, the expectations, the knowledge that millions of lives depend on getting this right. Palina felt the same way when she took the title. Vera said gently, the inheritance includes not just power and memories, but the fears and doubts of every storm caller before you. But it also includes their courage, their determination, their love for both worlds. Through the window of what had once been a simple ranger cabin and was now the de facto embassy between worlds, Seraphina could see the preparations underway. The ceremony would take place at sunset, when the veil between worlds was thinnest and the symbolic joining of human and supernatural communities would be most potent. Kael appeared in the doorway, resplendent in formal attire that blended traditional alpha regalia with the diplomatic dress of a supernatural ambassador. The silver in his hair caught the light, a permanent reminder of the night he'd helped her carry the inheritance of centuries. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she replied, though her hands trembled slightly as she took his arm. The ceremony itself was unlike anything in recorded history. Ancient rituals were woven together with modern legal frameworks, creating something entirely new, a union that was simultaneously personal, political, and mystical. Lord Pyraxis officiated, his dragon authority lending weight to vows that would reshape the supernatural world. Seraphina Blackthorn, Stormcaller of North America, do you accept the bond of mateship with Kael Thornwick, Alpha of the North Cascade Pack? "I do," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd with electrical resonance. "Kael Thornwick, Alpha of the North Cascade Pack, do you accept the bond of mateship with Seraphina Blackthorn, Stormcaller of North America?" "I do," Kael replied, his words backed by the harmonic howl of every wolf present. But the most moving moment came when Helena's spirit materialized one final time, her translucent hands placing a blessing on both their heads. "May your union bridge all worlds," she said, her voice echoing with the accumulated wisdom of centuries. "May your love light the way for those who come after, and may your courage never falter in the face of darkness." As they kissed, sealing not just their personal bond but the alliance between human and supernatural worlds. Lightning danced across the sky in patterns that spelled hope in a dozen different languages. A celebration that followed lasted 3 days and nights, featuring foods from every culture, music that blended human and supernatural traditions, and stories that wove together the histories of species that had hidden from each other for millennia. "So what happens now?" Kael asked on their wedding night as they stood on the deck of their expanded cabin, looking out over a valley transformed into a beacon of integration and cooperation. "Now we build something that's never existed before," Seraphina replied, her hand resting over his heart, where she could feel the steady rhythm that anchored her storm-tossed abilities. "A world where no one has to hide what they are, where differences are celebrated instead of feared, where children grow up knowing that magic is real and wonderful and part of the natural order." "Think it will work?" She considered the question, drawing on inherited memories that spanned centuries of conflict, cooperation, and hope. "I think it has to work. Because the alternative is a war that would destroy everything we've built, everything we love." In the distance, she could sense electromagnetic signatures approaching Covenant forces, probably, or international hunters, drawn by reports of the ceremony. But she could also sense something else: thousands of supernatural beings and human allies converging on their territory, drawn not by fear or hatred, but by hope for a better future. "Let them come," she said, electricity dancing around her fingers in patterns of welcome rather than warning. "All of them, enemies and allies alike. We'll show them what the future looks like when we choose cooperation over conflict." Kael's arm tightened around her waist. "Mates until the stars burn out?" "Mates until the stars burn out," she agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like lightning and forever. And in the valley below, human and supernatural communities continued their work of building tomorrow. One shared meal, one translated story, one moment of understanding at a time. The storm had passed. The real work of rebuilding the world had begun. Thank you for following Seraphina and Kael's journey from hiding in the mountains to building bridges between worlds. Their story reminds us that our greatest strength often lies not in hiding our differences, but in celebrating them as the foundation for something entirely new.